The M2 MacBook Air is apparently on the way, and frankly, you should not wait for it. So why is that? Let's find out. And while we're finding out, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace. From the videos and rumors that I've seen, this new MacBook could be anything from an internal spec bump to a totally new laptop that doesn't even need us because it basically runs itself. It might even just be some kind of floating display that has the laptop built into glasses. Maybe it's Apple Glasses laptop. Look, there's all sorts of hype and rumor abounding all around the internet right now, so let's go through some of the bigger claims and why I still don't think that you should wait for it. First off, before we get into any video about waiting for tech, I've got to give my normal stance. If you have a need now, say you are a student that just started back to school, you are an office worker that's upgrade time just so happens to be around the corner, or you are a creator that is looking to smooth out your workflow. If you have a need now, buy what you need now. I could end this video right here. That's all that I need to say. Video over. The current MacBook Air is still the most powerful Ultrabook that you can buy, and even with the updates to the new 12th gen Intel and the new low-powered Ryzen processors, there is nothing on the market that will be able to unseat this from its seat on top of the mountain. Plus, if you need more power than this, let's say you actually need like VFX work done, there are a ton of current options today that you could buy. Do not wait for whatever the next shiny product release is, because there is always a new shiny product release around the corner. What we should do from now on is just take that part of the video, cut it out, and just entirely copy and paste it the next time I have to say this. I want to start with my reasons on why not to wait, comparing what we currently have against the latest round of Windows Ultrabooks. It's too early to definitively call it because obviously I've not yet gotten my hands on a Dell XPS 13 Plus, a ThinkBook Plus, or any of the other new pluses. I didn't realize until as I was saying the script that like all the new Windows computers all have plus in the title. All of those shiny updates with their new Windows 12th gen or new Ryzen chips, a lot of cool stuff. We can't make any definitive statements yet. But from what we've seen post CES coverage, I think we can make some early statements. 1. The current M1 MacBook Air will continue to be the best option when it comes to overall battery life. 2. The current M1 MacBook Air will continue to be the best option when it comes to thermal performance. 3. The current M1 MacBook Air will continue to have more power than the top-of-the-line 16-inch Intel MacBook Pro 16. 4. The current M1 MacBook Air will continue to cost under $1,000 and under $800 depending on where you're shopping. Those 4 immutable facts make it hard for me to recommend anything outside of the original MacBook Air. I get it. I've personally made about 30 videos on this laptop by itself, and I'll probably make a couple more before I'm done. And here's where we're tying the next M2 MacBook Air combined with those Windows machines. This laptop is a revolutionary laptop. I don't mean evolutionary. I don't mean that, hey, it did some things better, it did some things worse, but it was an overall positive addition. This literally changed what can and should be expected from a portable computer. It's a perfect trifecta of power, price, and usability that we will probably never see again until some other revolution in computer processors happen. This by itself destroys all but a few very niche requirements that somebody could have as a reason for waiting on anything. Not just the M2 MacBook Air, but waiting on any computer. Because this exists, all other laptop reviews, especially productivity laptop reviews, all have to have an asterisk at the end of them now, because not only can you get a small computer, but you can get that computer with actual power, and the battery can last for days, not hours. If you couldn't tell, I'm a pretty big fan of what Apple did with the M1 MacBook Air. This is the best laptop ever made. Okay, some specific things that we've seen about the M2 MacBook Air that someone might use as a reason to wait for it. First up, an updated design. From the rumors I've seen, Apple might move away from the current and enduring MacBook Air design, the wedge shape. You see this? It's shaped as like a wedge angling down, and might turn it into something more akin to the MacBook Pros with their more flat and level design. Now, I'm of two minds in this. One, I love the current shape of the MacBook Air. Because of that wedge shaped where it's slightly angled down, it's incredibly comfortable to type all day long on this computer. And as I mainly type all day long on my laptop, that's pretty darn important, right? Like that is a pretty darn important thing to be comfortable when you're typing. As I've pointed out previously, those new MacBook Pros have very sharp edges, and because of how tall the new design body is, it's uncomfortable to use for long periods of time. You'll get that little notch in your forearm, so I would definitely not wait if comfort is one of your #1 priorities. However, if that more uniform body style can get us things like SD card slots, more Thunderbolt 4 ports, that might be an intriguing balancing act. Now, I wouldn't call it form over function, I would call it function over function, because that's going to be two different camps of usability. I don't think that with even a more level body, they'd be able to fit an HDMI of any sorts on here, so I don't think that that is anything to hold your breath over. I do think we will just have strictly Thunderbolt ports on a new MacBook Air. So the real question for waiting ends up being, do you need more than one external display? The M1 standard processor and its Thunderbolt 3 ports can only support one 6K display. That's it. We don't exactly know what an M2 processor might be capable of, but I would assume as the M1 Pro processor can handle two 6K displays, the M2 should probably be able to meet that at least. Do you plan on having a wall-o monitors as your working from home setup? If that answer is no, there is literally no reason to wait for an M2 MacBook Air. This is the one thing. The one single, yes, that single is in all caps in the script, that's the one use case where I would say, okay, maybe wait for the next version. The biggest downfall of the original M1 processor, in my opinion, has nothing to do with power or thermal performance or versatility. It's twofold. One, on those previous laptops, you only got two Thunderbolt ports, with both of those ports being on the same side. And two, those ports only worked with one external display. And I know a lot of folks that need at least two. So we'll have to see what the M2 specifically can do when it comes out. But if you can work off the laptop itself as a second screen, or just want one screen to do everything, that's what I personally use, I would absolutely chalk this up on the don't wait category. The second major update, the display. Honestly, I don't think Apple will make much of an update to the display itself. As a product, the MacBook Air still needs to hit a certain price point, and there is only so much you can do in the $1,000 range with a high-end display. They might get slightly thinner bezels in the next round, which sure, they'll look a little better, but I would be willing to place money down today that we won't see the super high contrast HDR ProMotion display from the Pro laptops. Those cost at bare minimum twice what the MacBook Air generally does, so they will probably not have the product budget to upgrade that far here. Plus, if they add in the notch for the smaller bezels, I've seen reports that this would have a white outline like the new M1 iMacs have. I don't want to say anything straight up looks bad because everyone has their personal opinions on designs, but the notch is already a hugely contentious topic, and you can barely tell it's there on the MacBook Pros. Having a white bezel really will make it stick out, and I think you'll have a harder time ignoring it when it's just bright and staring you right in the face. That's just me though, but I can already hear the YouTube videos being made complaining about this. Thanks, Apple. The only other major thing that could change about the MacBook Air would be the chip itself. What could we see from an M2 processor? From the rumors published so far, it seems like the M2 could have up to a 10-core CPU. Here's the thing though. Yes, more cores can do more things when we look at multi-threaded workflows and tasks like video editing, bulk photo editing, having 100 Google Chrome tabs open at once, processing code, etc. But for most things, it's a nice to have, certainly not a need to have. Single core performance ends up being a more useful spec to look at when we really want to see what a daily, regular user would do. You're watching YouTube, you're making PowerPoint slides, or just regular people stuff. I would bet we will not see that big of a difference single core performance wise year over year. Heck, this little MacBook Air, this thing that you could buy for around $800 has roughly the same single core performance as that monster $3,400 and up M1 Max processor. Yes, the M1 Max has 10 cores and does do much better for those multi-threaded workflows, but if you aren't doing one of those things I listed, it's not worth the price. I personally do think the M1 Max has value, and it's been amazing for me personally, but I also process terabytes of video files a month. If you aren't like me, and statistically speaking, the vast majority of you are not, waiting around for a boost in processing power does not make sense. The only reason you might wait around for something because of the power itself is for the potential longevity that chip might give you in regards to things like operating system updates, security patches, things like that. But the computer chip world works a little differently than the mobile world, at least in my opinion. I've already said the M1 standard has more power than the Intel-based i9 MacBook Pro 16. Objectively speaking, this thing trumps that computer. And anecdotal evidence combined with Apple's assurance that they will keep supporting those Intel Macs per usual means that laptop has about a 7-year lifespan, which should go through 2026. If we keep that time frame with the MacBook Air, this should last until 2027, but again, it's far more powerful than the Intel Mac and should be able to run operating systems for much longer than that. I would imagine that this current M1 MacBook Air will be relevant and updated for years to come. I would be surprised if it doesn't make a decade or more. So just another darn reason not to wait. Plus, let's look at something that's incredibly valuable to me, battery life. We've already talked about making the computer smaller, and we've already talked about the computer potentially being more powerful. So if a computer physically has less space, we can't really put a bigger battery in there, right? But the demands of a more powerful chip based on the same underlying tech, I mean, it'll have to get power from somewhere, right? I would imagine that all of that adds up to less overall longevity for an M2 MacBook Air. We've already seen with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, even with their bigger batteries, in practicality, they can't keep up with the current M1 standard processors for efficiency. Team, I'm gonna call it right now. Much like the display thing, the battery life in the M2 MacBook Air will be reported to be less than the M1 MacBook Air, and in actuality, will probably be much less. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Apple is able to prove me wrong here, but they aren't wizards. They have to obey some laws of physics, right? Apple just can't keep getting away with revolutionizing everything every year, right? But at the end of the day, so what, right? Yes, I'm excited to see what comes out from Apple in the next year. I can't wait to see what might be coming with the latest M2 processor, and I think Macs are on pace to continue to dominate the laptop space. However, it's not going to re-revolutionize what we've already got from 2020. I think we'll see some solid upgrades, but nothing that's really worth waiting on unless you need those multiple display things. That's the only reason I would wait. It'd be for that. The M1 MacBook Air will probably keep being my main laptop recommendation until Apple discontinues it. You are not going to find another small computer that can do the things that this can do at its price. It's literally mind-boggling. Today's sponsor, Squarespace. You can create your own very beautiful website. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a professional website, online store, or portfolio. It's so easy to claim a domain/URL, create a custom site that matches your style, and brings your ideas to life. Head on over to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, head on over to squarespace.com/everydaydad to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. And thank you for watching.